The bell that signaled the end of Muhammad Ali's career was stolen from a cow in a nearby field. There was no official bell at the venue, no proper boxing ring, no dressing rooms, no gloves when the fighters arrived. The key to the main gate had been misplaced, so the crowd stood outside in the December heat, unable to enter, while organizers searched for it. When they finally got in, they discovered two pairs of boxing gloves for an entire fight card. The promoter was a convicted felon. When Don King arrived demanding his contractual share of the proceeds, two associates of the promoter administered a beating to him in the parking lot. This was the night Muhammad Ali, three-time heavyweight champion of the world, the man who had beaten Sonny Liston and George Foreman and Joe Frazier, the athlete who had sacrificed his prime years rather than violate his conscience, climbed through the ropes for the 61st and final time. Not at Madison Square Garden. Not at Caesar's Palace. In a decaying baseball field in Nassau, Bahamas, at 39 years old, wearing a rubber corset to sweat off the excess weight he had arrived carrying. The tragedy was not that Ali lost. It is that everyone who mattered already knew he would, and nobody stopped it. 14 months before the Berbick fight, Larry Holmes had done something to Muhammad Ali that nobody who witnessed it ever fully recovered from. October 2, 1980, Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. Ali came out of a 2-year retirement to challenge Holmes for the WBC Heavyweight Championship, having told the press that he had been declared fit by, in his own words, even the best white doctors. The medical record told a more troubling story. 10 weeks before that fight, a team of physicians at the Mayo Clinic had submitted a medical report to the Nevada State Athletic Commission. The report described a small hole in the outer layer of Ali's brain and noted that the boxer himself had reported a tingling sensation in his hands and slurred speech. The examining neurologist, Dr. Frank Howard, found Ali having difficulty speaking, difficulty hopping on one leg, and difficulty touching his finger to his nose. Dr. Howard found no specific reason to prohibit Ali from fighting. A boxing license was granted. Holmes won every round. He reduced Ali to a human punching bag for 10 rounds, landing punch after punch with barely any returned. In round 9, a devastating right uppercut left Ali draped against the ropes, and Holmes followed with a right hook to the kidney that caused Ali to bellow in pain. Holmes's own trainer, Ray Arcel, begged Holmes to end it quickly and spare the former champion further punishment. Holmes later said it was the worst night of his professional life. Not because of anything Holmes had done wrong, but because of what he was required to do to the man he had once been honored to call his friend and sparring partner. Ali's corner stopped the fight before the 11th round began. Ali had landed fewer than 10 meaningful punches across 10 rounds. The boxing world assumed Ali was finished. Every American state athletic commission apparently agreed. When Ali announced his intention to fight again 14 months later, not a single one would issue him a boxing license. He had failed neurological examinations that his own team had hoped the Mayo Clinic results might obscure. The evidence of decline was now too public and too documented to work around. So Ali went to the Bahamas. The man who made the Berbick fight happen was James Cornelius, described in contemporary reports as a convicted felon with links to the Nation of Islam. The fight was officially titled Drama in Bahama, a name so transparently promotional that even the press corps covering it refused to use it without quotation marks, preferring their own alternative. The Trauma in the Bahamas. The Queen Elizabeth Sports Center in Nassau sounds like an appropriate venue for a heavyweight fight. In reality, it was a cluster of deteriorating baseball diamonds on the outskirts of the city, better suited to a local softball league than the final chapter of the most celebrated boxing career in history. The unfinished construction was visible from the ringside seats. Ali dressed for the most important night of his career in a public restroom. Tickets had been priced as high as $1,000 in the weeks leading up to the fight. By the days immediately before it, they had been slashed to a fraction of that price and were being sold at a local McDonald's. Promoters ultimately gave away tickets on the night because the paying audience was smaller than the event required to appear legitimate. The night before the fight, Ali sat in his hotel villa on Paradise Island, performing magic tricks for journalists. He produced a black and red attaché case from which he made half-dollars become quarters and pennies become dimes. He made a handkerchief and a candle disappear. He made a silk scarf flutter from the table as though lifted by a ghost while he chanted quietly, "Rise, ghost. Rise, ghost. Rise." The magic show went on for 40 minutes. One of the journalists who watched it, Sports Illustrated's William Knack, later wrote that there was only one ghost in the Bahamas that week, and it was Muhammad Ali, and the only magic he had left was what he performed in that hotel villa. The magic he had performed in boxing rings for 27 years had already departed. Trevor Berbick, the 28-year-old Jamaican-born Canadian who was the man being paid to end Ali's career officially, refused to enter the ring on fight night until he had been paid his fee of $350,000 in cash. Up front, before a single punch was thrown, the fight started more than 2 hours behind schedule. When it finally began, the bell was a cowbell. Someone had found it in a field nearby and pressed it into service because no actual boxing bell existed at the venue. The bell that started and ended each round in the final fight of Muhammad Ali's career was the same bell farmers used to track their cattle. Angelo Dundee was in Ali's corner. The trainer who had been there since 1960, who had worked every major fight of Ali's career, who had shouted, "You're blowing it, son," into Sugar Ray Leonard's ear at a crucial moment and changed the result of that fight. Dundee was there. He had told the press that he was very pleased with what he had seen in training, that he hadn't thought Ali could go through it again, but that he was ready to beat Berbick. Years later, Dundee acknowledged that the publicly confident assessment had been a performance. Those closest to Ali knew the truth. His 10-year-old daughter Jamila had said it directly in the days before the fight. "I'm worried that my daddy might get hurt." Ali's mother Odessa had visited him at training, bringing a friend backstage to meet her famous son. The visit was warm and ordinary, Ali giving someone a lifelong memory, lighting up a room the way he always did. But the concern in Odessa's face was something those who witnessed it did not forget. In the early rounds of the fight, Ali tried to throw combinations. They proved ineffectual. His hands, which had moved at speeds that made elite fighters look stationary 20 years earlier, were now slower than Berbick's and significantly slower than they needed to be. He found himself backed against the ropes in the first round, absorbing body shots, the ring generalship that had defined his career reduced to survival. The fifth round offered a brief moment of false hope. Ali landed some solid jabs and connected with a right-left-right combination that momentarily troubled Berbick and sent a ripple of hope through the modest crowd. For perhaps 90 seconds, there was something recognizable in what Ali was doing, a ghost of the footwork, a shadow of the combinations. Then it was gone. By the sixth round, Ali was exhausted. He was being hit cleanly and consistently and had no meaningful response. In the seventh round, Berbick landed a sustained assault that nobody stepped in to stop. He paused in the middle of it, turned to look at referee Zach Clayton, and shouted the words that captured everything about what was happening in that ring. "He's hurt." Berbick, who was being paid to beat Ali, was begging the referee to stop the fight because what he was doing felt less like boxing and more like something he did not want to be responsible for. Clayton let it continue. By the final rounds, Ali was, in the words of British journalist Reg Gutteridge, steadily exhausted rather than violently hurt. The mercy in the situation was that Berbick did not possess the kind of one-punch power that could have produced a more graphically devastating ending. What happened instead was 10 rounds of accumulated punishment, of watching a 39-year-old man absorb the consequences of the decision nobody around him had been willing to make. Berbick won by unanimous decision. The ringside writer, whose words have most often been used to describe what happened that night in Nassau, wrote that watching Ali lose to a moderate fighter in such a grubby context was like watching a king riding into permanent exile on the back of a garbage truck. The metaphor has endured for 40 years because it captures something precise about the gap between what Ali had been and what December 11th, 1981 required him to be. At the post-fight press conference, held in a room on the third floor of a Bahamian hotel, Muhammad Ali sat on the edge of a couch and talked for 40 minutes. He was subdued in a way that people who had known him for years found unfamiliar. The man who had called himself the greatest and backed up the claim across 3 decades of public performance was finally allowing the public to see something quieter. He said, "I think I'm too old. I was slow. I was weak. Nothing but father time. The things I wanted to do, I couldn't do. I was doing my best. I did good for a 39-year-old. I think I'm finished. I know it's the end. I'm not crazy. After Holmes, I had excuses. I was too light. Didn't breathe right. No excuses this time. I'm happy. I'm still pretty. I could have a black eye. Broken teeth." He also said something that the press did not fully understand at the time. It's a joy and a relief to know that it's over. Not sadness, not misgiving. Relief. The way a man sets down a burden he has been carrying for longer than he should have. Acknowledging finally that the weight has become more than the carrying is worth. He had been doing it since he was 12 years old. In the 39 years and 48 weeks that had passed since then, he had given the sport everything it was possible to give. The sport had not always protected him in return. 3 years after the Berbick fight, in 1984, Muhammad Ali was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease at the age of 42. The doctors who treated Ali for more than 20 years at Emory University published their clinical findings decades later in JAMA Neurology. Their conclusion was that Ali had young-onset idiopathic Parkinson's disease, not dementia from repetitive head trauma, but Parkinson's disease specifically, with a presentation consistent with a condition that had begun during the middle phase of his boxing career. His symptoms improved with levodopa, the standard Parkinson's medication. His tremor was asymmetric and present at rest. His progressive rigidity and bradykinesia matched the classical Parkinson's profile. Dr. Abe Lieberman, who diagnosed Ali in 1984 and became his physician for years afterward, said plainly that Ali probably already had Parkinson's when he climbed into the ring against Holmes in 1980, which means he almost certainly had it when he fought Berbick in 1981. Ali himself, in a quiet moment years later, said, "If I had known Holmes was going to whip me and damage my brain, I would not have fought him. But losing to Holmes and being sick are not important in God's world." His own physician did not believe boxing had caused the Parkinson's. The medical evidence supported a genetic and neurological origin rather than trauma as the primary cause. But boxing may have accelerated what was already beginning. The Mayo Clinic report 10 weeks before the Holmes fight, with its notation of slurred speech and tingling hands and a small hole in the brain's outer layer, described a man whose neurological condition was already producing symptoms. The license was granted anyway. The fight happened, and 14 months after Holmes, Ali was in the Bahamas with a cowbell. The tragedy of the Berbick fight is not that Ali lost. He had lost before, to Frazier, to Norton, to Holmes. The tragedy is that the mechanisms which might have prevented it existed and were not used. American state athletic commissions had refused Ali a license. That was the system working precisely as it was supposed to work. But the Bahamas had no such process. A promoter with a criminal record could organize a fight in a baseball field with no gloves and no bell and no proper medical oversight, and the licensing that the United States had declined to provide was simply obtained elsewhere. Angelo Dundee went along with it. The team went along with it. The promoters organized it. The money, Ali received $1.1 million, was sufficient justification for almost everyone involved. Only the people who had no financial stake in the outcome said what needed to be said. Jamila Ali, 10 years old, worried that her daddy might get hurt. Odessa Clay, who had watched her son box since he was 12 years old, was concerned in ways that her face showed without her needing to say it. Berbick himself, in round 7, asked the referee to step in and end it. Ali himself, the morning after it was over, said it was a joy and a relief to know it was done. Everyone knew. Nobody stopped it. That is the tragedy, not the result. The decision that made the result possible, made in hotel rooms and negotiations and licensing offices and doctors' reports that were read and then set aside, because Muhammad Ali wanted one more fight and the people around him found ways to make it happen. The cowbell still rings, if you listen for it, stolen from a field to signal the end of the greatest career boxing has ever produced. The most appropriate metaphor for what that night actually was. Not a championship fight, not a legacy fight, not even a fight with a proper bell. A Tuesday night in a baseball field in Nassau with a borrowed cowbell and 2 pairs of gloves for the whole card, and the greatest fighter who ever lived walking out for the 61st time because no one around him had found the courage to say no.